Hello everyone, my name is Holly and today I'll be walking you through how to build a website using Hypertext Markup language, better known as HTML. This will be a very basic introduction to some of the basic terms and building a site from a notepad into an HTML browser page. Before we get started, there are a few things we should know to become familiar with the terminology it takes to build just a very basic website using HTML. First, we'll break down HTML itself. Hypertext Markup Language is a computer language used to create web pages by surrounding raw text with information the computer can interpret and process to be displayed on a web page. We're basically using our computer as an interpreter between the content that we want displayed and the way it can be displayed through the internet. Each piece of information will be set between angled brackets using the left and right arrows, and all of these are called HTML elements. These are HTML code that live inside the angle brackets, and this is the information that the computer is processing into a website. Each element, with one exception that we'll discuss later, begins with an opening tag between the angle brackets, and after the element, a closing tag, which is the second tag used at the end of an element, and while it's between the angle brackets, there's also a / before the raw text. Opening and closing tags are necessary for every element, and if they're missing, could cause a miscommunication between your computer and the content you want displayed on your website. We're going to walk through a brief introduction of starting a web page through Notepad. First, we'll get started on a Windows desktop using Notepad. If you're using Mac, you'll have another text selection. At the beginning of any site, you have to make sure and describe the language you're prepared to use. In our case, we're using HTML, which requires a declaration of open angle bracket, exclamation, doc type HTML, closed angle bracket. This is the only one that doesn't need a closing. Then, for every HTML page, all of the data that you want displayed and a part of your website must lie between the opening and closing HTML elements you've just seen typed here. Everything in your website lives between these two elements. The first thing we're going to start with is a head and a title for that head. This information will not be in your body content of your website, rather in the title tab above the website. We're going to call this one Holly's Web Page Title. I've opened the title and the head, and before moving forward with another element, we have to have the closing tag with the / in our raw data to close out the intended element. We've closed the head and the title, and now we can move forward to the body. The body of your content is everything displayed within the website window. Everything that lives between the opening body element and the closing body element will be displayed on your website. Your website lives here, between these two. The first element we're going to use as content for our website is a heading. Much like Microsoft Word, headings can be categorized from larger to smaller, the largest being heading 1, which is what we're starting with here. So we open using the heading element, which is H1 for heading 1, and closing it out outside the raw data. Next, we'll have a paragraph of information. The language element for paragraph is P within its opening brackets. Then the content that I want displayed, and then remembering to close said bracket. All of this information is going to be viewed underneath the first heading. Now we'll start a second heading. As you may have guessed, heading 2 is H2. We'll have an opening tag for H2, type in our raw data, I'm using heading number 2, and close the heading with the closing tag element for heading 2. Under heading 2, I want an unordered list. An unordered list will list items in no specific order as a bulleted list. That means they're there. That doesn't mean they're numbered. Each list item will be opened with an LI element. So we open our unordered list, open a list item. My first item is pancakes. I figured if we're doing random, we'll get random. Then we close our list item before moving on to the next. An opening list item tag, followed by the raw data, bicycle tires. Don't forget to close your element. One more random on our unordered list. We'll open with our list item, type the third list item, peach trees, and close our list item with the closing tag with the list item element. These three items will show up with bullets, not numbers. We'll start one more heading, and as we move down to heading 3, remember that this heading will appear smaller than the first two. We're opening an H3. I'm calling this heading with my raw text heading number 3 and closing the heading. This time we'll use an ordered list. The element for ordered list is OL between the opening brackets. This list item, I'm using different words for first and number 1. Remember that this will be ordered sequentially. When this list item shows up, it will be next to a number 1, followed by number 2, and so forth. Our next item, opened with a line item, is second, and close the line item with our closing tag and our line item element between the brackets. One more number will be listed as our third item, again sequentially for number 3. Opening our line item, entering our raw text, and closing our line item. I have now input information between the two body elements to ensure that this is displayed in my website as part of the body. We also need to make sure to close every single HTML document with the closing element of HTML. This ensures that everything between these two will be read in HTML language. Now we'll move forward, File, Save As, and this document needs to be saved somewhere where you'll remember it, and it needs to be under the Save As type of all files. When I type in a name, we'll call this index. I need to end it with .html, again to ensure that the computer reads this in an HTML language. Now that I've saved and closed my Notepad document, I'll go back into my documents and find index. Now that we've opened it, you'll see right at the top on what we put between the head and title is my web page title, only showing the raw text. The same goes for the heading 1, the paragraph content, heading 2, my unordered list items that have no sequence, and heading 3, in which case I had an ordered list item in a sequential order of first, second, and third. We've just put together a website that you can open on a web browser using HTML language. Next, we're going to look forward and see what it looks like in comparison. It's interesting to me to find in the left box the HTML language typed out. We can see the raw data we want displayed, but it's surrounded by HTML elements that maybe don't make sense at first. Now that we have an idea that these lines like HTML within angle brackets are letting a computer know, here's how I want this read. The heading bracket with a title lets the computer know this is the title I want. We'll see here that our raw data here, Holly's web page title, is displayed here as the title of a web page tab, only using the raw data. Here, between our heading elements for heading 1, we only see the raw data displayed in the web browser. We have now used HTML as a computer language to display raw data of our choosing in a browser. When you're looking on a website, you may not realize that behind the site you've probably seen several times lies an entire set of a different language. While using Google Chrome, I selected Control-U and was able to pull up all of the HTML language behind the Texas State website. You'll see here that just as we did, they have to declare the language type and open the HTML code. This site obviously goes much further into depth of the language of HTML and styling issues that we haven't come up with yet. Most sites use a CSS style, and that's going to be my next set of information that I want to learn for coding languages. We've now made a web page. After this, you'll have a basic understanding that even if you don't know all the elements, you have a good understanding of how HTML language is built, processed, and displayed. The elements are like learning a different language. If you take a Spanish class, you have to learn Spanish vocabulary. You also have to understand how you're going to translate that information to what you already know into the new language you're learning. This language just happens to be like a robot. Thanks to Code Academy for teaching me how to use HTML on a basic level. Please visit www.codeacademy.com for further information in learning HTML, CSS, and other coding languages.